What a journey we have today. We're diving into this really fascinating source. It's a novella from 2025 called Pandora Is Real, The Search for the Last Orchid by David Wayne Blackmore.
Right. Now, the author, he does call it fiction, but importantly, he says its roots are, and I'm quoting here, tangled with history, ecology, and spirit.
Okay.
So it's inspired by the Colombian Andes, real orchid collectors. He even names Maria Ferrero, Saul Lado, and crucially, indigenous wisdom.
So for this deep dive, we're kind of treating the story itself as the source material, exploring its world as if it reveals certain truths.
Precisely. We're taking its narrative as our factual content to analyze.
And that narrative takes us straight to the Colombian Andes. Specifically, this mythical place called the Pandora Forest, high up in Santander.
And the focus, the thing everyone's after, is the orchid ultima.
The last orchid.
The last orchid, yeah. It's described as sacred, only blooming once a century under very specific conditions. It represents a song of two worlds, science and spirit, matter and myth. You can feel that tension right from the start.
Definitely. And the characters we meet in the prologue, they signal this isn't just, hunting for a flower.
No way. You've got a scientist, driven by knowledge, a woman who apparently reads the wings of bees.
Wow.
Yeah. And then a rival, sort of masked in reason. Very intriguing setup.
And adding another layer, part of the story is told from the perspective of the jungle itself. It literally says, I am the jungle.
Which is amazing. It immediately tells you the forest isn't just backdrop, it's an active participant, a character.
Yeah, it flips the whole thing. This isn't just about finding something rare. The source calls it a reckoning.
A test. A test of what is remembered and forgotten, and also about what must be protected even when unseen. Big themes.
So our mission here is to follow this narrative journey laid out in the source. We'll pull out those specific details, plant names, locations, myths, but mainly.
Mainly, we want to unpack the insights the story offers about, well, us and nature, our relationship with it.
Tracking that tension you mentioned. Seeking versus stillness.
Possession versus presence. That's the core conflict we're exploring.
Okay, let's get into it. We start with our main protagonist, Dr. Pedro Gonzales. The novella gives us his backstory, born poor in Paipa, Colombia.
Yeah, and he had this early fascination sparked by finding a wild orchid as a boy. It clearly stuck with him.
And now he's, a world-renowned botanist, cited in Nature.
Exactly, top of his field. But the source makes a point of saying he still feels like that curious kid inside. And he has this deep connection to Colombian history, the soil. It mentions the Pantano de Vargas, the Lanceros monument.
Ordinary people fighting for something vital.
Right, so he's grounded in both science and this deeper sense of place.
Which sets the stage perfectly. So what kicks off this specific journey for him?
He gets this message, really cryptic, untraceable, on some old device.
What does it say?
La última florecerá bajo la constelación perdida. El tiempo se acaba.
The last will bloom beneath the lost constellation. Time is running out. Intense.
Very. And for Pedro, this isn't just another wild goose chase. He's apparently had false leads before.
But this time feels different.
Profoundly different, yeah. The source says he feels the jungle didn't just call him this time. It warned him.
Warned him. What does that distinction suggest right away?
Well, it immediately raises the stakes, doesn't it? Makes it feel more personal, maybe even spiritual, not just a scientific quest for discovery, but something urgent, tied to the life of the forest itself.
And that urgency seems to ramp up when we meet Maggie Sinclair.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
Described as brilliant, clear-eyed, a field biologist.
The one who reads the wings of bees like others read scripture? What a line.
Isn't it? It tells you she sees things differently, perhaps beyond just the data points, sees patterns, maybe intention.
They have some history. Met at a conference.
Yeah, years ago. And there's a dynamic, mentioned her initial skepticism maybe, versus his quieter conviction.
And the urgency, it's not just a feeling Pedro has, it's ecological, based on the story's details.
Absolutely. The orchid ultima, it exists in what the source calls a closed system with a specific bee, the Euglossa ultima.
The ultra-rare orchid bee.
Ultra-rare is right, possibly only a few dozen individuals left, and the orchid only blooms once a century, needing specific conditions.
Which are aligning right now, this week.
Exactly, near these Pandora caves. And here's the critical part. Without this bloom, now the bee species could be lost forever.
Wow.
And without both the orchid and the bee, the whole Pandora biome, this intricate web of life starts to collapse. Maggie's seen the bee counts. She knows how close they are to the edge.
So the search for one flower becomes this desperate race against time to save an entire ecosystem. That really frames it.
It does. And then adding another layer of complication, there's the rival, Rafael Calderon.
Ah, the rival. And there's history there with Pedro, too.
Yes, apparently Rafael was something of a mentor, taught Pedro how to see, as the source puts it.
But something changed.
It seems so. Rafael apparently started selling what he saw, turned ecological knowledge into a commodity, sacred ground into inventory. That's a harsh description.
It is. So Pedro walked away.
Pedro walked away. Rafael didn't. And now Rafael is in the same region, operating solo, paying guides cash, no permits, off the books.
That paints a very clear picture of that possession mindset, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Compared to Pedro's more rooted approach.
Definitely. And there's this strange local myth that started swirling around Rafael specifically.
Oh.
Locals whisper that something's following him, not human, a presence.
A presence?
They call it Fantasma, ghost, or more pointedly, el que no deja huella.
The one who leaves no footprint? Crazy.
Yeah. Right. Pedro initially brushes it off as just campfire stories, folklore, but the source introduces it early, like this persistent background hum.
And as Pedro and Maggie actually start their journey toward the Pandora forest, things get, well, strange. Omens start appearing.
They do. The line between sort of objective reality and the story's unique reality really starts to blur.
What's the first big one?
This absolutely unnatural swarm of orchid bees, shimmering green and gold in sandgill. They circle Pedro, then head east.
Unnatural how?
Maggie, the bee expert, remembers she instantly recognizes they're following a synthetic cue. Not natural behavior at all. Meaning Raphael's likely using chemicals to lure them, and it means they're already behind him in the race. This beautiful natural sight is actually a sign of manipulation.
Yeah, okay. What else happens?
Well, they pass some school children who grin and call out, Fantasma!
So the kids know the story, too.
Exactly. It shows how woven into the place this myth is. Pedro even acknowledges, yeah, the kids know the stories. It's like the land itself is whispering about it.
And the journey itself is physically demanding, too, right? Not just weird omens.
Oh, yeah. The road literally collapses from a landslide, forcing them to hike. The terrain is brutal. And then there's a really dangerous river crossing.
What happens there?
A log bridge they need to use gets washed away by a sudden flash flood just moments after Pedro barely scrambles across. It feels less like bad luck and more like a test.
Like the jungle is actively resisting, or at least making them prove themselves.
Something like that. And then, as if to confirm the timing of everything as they make camp that evening,
Let me guess. The lost constellation.
appears right on cue at dusk, perfectly aligning with the message Pedro received.
Okay, so the universe, or at least the sky in the story, seems to be saying, yes, this is the time.
It really sets the stage for them going deeper, doesn't it? Into the jungle's influence and the warnings that seem to come with it.
Right, so they push deeper into the jungle. What's the feeling described there?
Increased watchfulness.
Yeah.
The source says the air felt dense with waiting, like the forest itself was holding its breath.
And they encounter something unexpected.
A river. One that's not on any map. It's described as wide, dark, fast. And the feeling it gives off is intense.
How so?
Like it wanted something. Pedro feels like it was asking me to leave something behind.
Leave something behind, like what?
Well, it contrasts interestingly with the local belief about this river. The locals say the river forgets nothing, but it asks you to forget who you were when you entered.
Ah, okay, so it's symbolic. Shedding your old self, maybe your preconceptions, to truly enter this space.
Exactly. The river remembers the land, but you need to forget your old identity, your mission maybe, to proceed. Powerful idea.
And it's near this river that Pedro has that really significant encounter.
The jaguar, yes, across the water.
The description sounds amazing.
It is. Broad-shouldered, golden, black-spotted. But it's the eyes they focus on. Otherworldly obsidian, ancient knowing, seeing more than one lifetime.
Wow.
And the source is very specific. It stood not as a predator, but as a sentinel. Like nature itself paused to look back at him.
A sentinel. And Maggie doesn't see it clearly.
No. It vanishes before she gets a good look. Which suggests this moment, this sighting, might be specifically for Pedro, part of his internal journey.
And this encounter seems to trigger something in him, right? Leads to a dream.
His first really significant dream, yeah. It happens that night.
What's in the dream?
He's by that river again, but it's still now, like glass, reflecting stars. He sees a huge fig tree full of glowing orchids.
Beautiful imagery.
And the jaguar's there, It rests beside him, breathes on his chest. He feels it like wind, memory, recognition.
Recognition, there's that word again.
Yes. And then a voice, seemingly from the air, tells him something crucial.
What?
You must stop seeking to find. What you seek will reveal itself when you become still.
Stop seeking to find. Become still.
Yeah.
That's a direct challenge to his scientific mindset, isn't it?
Completely. It's all about active searching in his field. This is the opposite. Wait, receive. He sees an older, clearer, fearless version of himself reflected in the jaguar's eyes. A withered flower drops into his hand.
And how does he feel when he wakes up?
Like something was given, but also something was left behind. Transformed somehow.
That message about stillness. It feels like the core wisdom the forest is trying to impart.
It really does. This counterintuitive approach. The journey continues, and then the trail just vanishes, and a village appears.
Appears? Like out of nowhere.
Seemingly. There's some initial tension, naturally, but it shifts. They have this respectful meeting with the elders, and also a younger woman.
He's wearing something
A
significant.
t-shirt that reads, El Boss Cabla the Forest Speaks.
Okay, that's pretty direct. Almost like the jungle's narrative voice breaking through into the real world of the story.
Right. It's a nice touch. And they confirm Raphael was there, and that he left the forest wrong behind him. That phrase again.
Leaving the forest wrong. It implies damage, disrespect. Do they learn more about the Fantasma myth here?
Yes, the elders share the full story. It's not just a ghost. It's an ancient jaguar spirit.
A spirit?
Yeah, one that watched humans harming the land for so long it didn't attack, but became a guardian instead. It walks through dreams. It knows your heart if you seek power or truth.
Doesn't speak or roar, just watches.
Exactly. And seeing it, really seeing it, changes your path. Some elders even say it's not really an animal anymore, but something else. What's left when nature listens too long? The jungle's memory, basically. And this memory appears only to those who are ready.
So Fantasma is the embodied memory and conscience of the forest.
Wow.
Heavy stuff.
Deeply symbolic. And then the younger woman gives Pedro a gift.
What is it?
A small carved wooden jaguar token. It has a glowing slash mark on it.
Glowing.
Yeah. And she tells him it's for the road, but specifically not for protection, it's for recognition.
There's that word again. Third time. Jaguar encounter, dream, now the token. Recognition. What is he supposed to recognize?
That seems to be the unfolding mystery for him. The gift feels important, though, and that night in the village guest house, he has another dream.
Second big dream. What happens in this one?
He's standing at the mouth of a cave, sees stars reflected in orchids again, and Fantasma appears.
The jaguar.
Yes. This time it presses its forehead right against his chest. He feels heat pass through him again, described as memory, recognition.
But there's a voice this time, too.
Yes, but different. This voice rises from within Pedro himself, as if the jungle is speaking through him.
Whoa. What does it say?
You do not own what you understand, you only become it.
Okay, hang on. You do not own what you understand, you only become it. That's huge. That completely reframes the idea of knowledge.
It absolutely does. It's the polar opposite of Raphael's approach, understanding something to exploit it, possess it.
This is saying true understanding changes you. You merge with it somehow.
Exactly. Knowing the forest, the orchid, the jaguar, these aren't puzzles to solve or prizes to win. They are living truths. Understanding them means being transformed by them, not gaining ownership or control.
How does he feel waking from that?
His breath feels like it belongs to the jungle, and the wooden token feels warm in his hand. He's clearly undergoing a profound internal shift.
This is intense preparation for whatever comes next, which leads us into the crucible, right? Entering the Pandora forest proper.
Yeah, Act 3. They reach the actual Pandora forest. There's a restricted access sign, but the feeling described is deeper than that, the forest becoming like a single listening entity.
And getting in isn't easy.
No, it involves a serious rappel nearly 300 feet down into this canyon and cave system.
What's it like down there?
A whole hidden world. The source mentions the unique ecosystem: guano, bats creating heat, glowworms, and orchids just clinging everywhere. It sounds otherworldly.
And this is where Maggie has her big moment, connecting with the bees.
Yes. Her expertise really finds here. She finds a cluster of these rare orchids, and near the ceiling, a whole vortex of the Euglossa ultima bees.
The ultra-rare ones.
The very ones. And she witnesses it, a bee entering an orchid, the flower vibrating. She puts it together scientifically. This precise interaction is the trigger.
The trigger for the bloom cycle.
Exactly. It's about specificity, timing, pheromonal cues, hard evidence. But her insight goes further. She sees it as evidence of intention, not just random adaptation.
Intention in nature.
Yeah.
That has another layer, doesn't it? Like there's a purposefulness to this delicate dance.
It suggests a deeper intelligence at play, maybe, but then things go wrong. The bees suddenly turn aggressive.
Why? What happens?
Pedro's headlamp beam sweeps across the swarm and they just dive, stinging both him and Maggie.
Ouch.
Yeah, and Maggie immediately notes they're agitated, being driven. This isn't normal defensive behavior. Something is messing with them.
They quickly figure out what?
They find Raphael's camp nearby, and it's a wreck.
What do they find?
Chaos, basically. Melted equipment, leaking chemical vials, and a distinct smell. Synthetic compounds?
What kind?
Methyl salicylate, ethylene. Chemicals used in commercial orchid farming to force blooms.
So Raphael was trying to
Force the orchid ultima to bloom early. On his schedule, Pedro realizes he was flooding the cave air with these synthetics, trying to duplicate nature.
And the source uses that powerful phrase.
In a womb not meant for conquest. It perfectly captures the violation of it, trying to impose his will on this sacred natural cycle.
Did they find anything else? Like what was going through his head?
They found his journal, and it shows his mental state just unraveling.
How so?
He writes about being frustrated, the bees reacting unpredictably to the chemicals. Then he starts hearing the cave walls speaking to him, seeing eyes, teeth, and claws in the roots.
He's hallucinating, losing it.
Totally. He starts believing he was chosen for this. And the last entry, it's torn out, but it says he'd follow the bees if they found the orchid first. A desperate final gamble.
This whole scene sounds incredibly tense, and then they actually confront him.
Yes. He appears, gaunt, wild-eyed, clearly hallucinating. He's muttering to the cave walls.
What's he saying?
He thinks the cave lied to him. He claims he brought the light, he brought the bloom, and then he screams it. The orchid is mine.
That possessiveness taken to its absolute breaking point.
And the reaction is immediate and violent.
From Raphael.
No, from the cave itself.
The cave reacts.
According to the source, yes. The moment he screams mine, the cave walls start cracking, trembling. Rocks fall, smashing all his remaining equipment.
Whoa.
It's like the forest, the earth itself is rejecting his claim, his rage. Pedro and Maggie barely manage to escape into a side tunnel as the main chamber collapses.
Incredible. But they're not safe yet.
No. Blocking their retreat in the tunnel is Fantasma.
The jaguar.
Again.
Eyes glowing in the darkness, just watching them. Pedro meets its gaze, and he sees it again.
Recognition.
Recognition. But this time, Fantasma doesn't block them. It turns and leads Pedro deeper into the darkness.
Leads him where?
We don't know exactly, because this is where Pedro, injured and now alone, collapses, which triggers the final, most profound dream. The source calls it Pedro's Night of Death. Sounds ominous. What happens in this final dream?
It's layered. First, it takes him back to the Pantano de Vargas swamp from his childhood connection. He sees the Lanceros, those farmers turned fighters.
The ones from the monument.
Right. He sees them acting from truth, even in doubt, even in fear. One gives him a withered orchid, connecting back to his initial inspiration. It's about courage rooted in place and history.
Okay. Then what?
The scene shifts dramatically. He sees a burned clearing, and Raphael is there, being consumed by light.
Consumed. Like destroyed.
Seems like it. A vivid image of his destructive path reaching its inevitable end, and then Pedro finds himself facing Fantasma again.
The jaguar.
But it transforms into nature itself. Mountain, river, sky, galaxies, everything.
Whoa. The ultimate merging.
This is the peak revelation for him. The understanding hits him with fierce, sobering clarity.
What's the understanding?
That nature is the first and final voice, giver and destroyer. That humans don't own nature, they don't possess it, they are nature.
We are nature.
Yes. So destroying nature is literally destroying ourselves. He weeps. Not from sadness, the source says, but from this clarity, remembering what he truly is. Part of it all.
What a transformation. How is he when he wakes up?
Injured, physically weak, but fundamentally changed. His whole worldview has shifted.
Is there any sign from Fantasma? From the forest?
Yes. Near where he wakes, he finds a single, curved claw print in the earth. And nestled in the center of it is a tiny seedling.
A seedling?
Yeah, the source describes it as a mark left not in anger. It had been left in trust.
Trust. Wow. So the forest Fantasma recognizes his change.
It seems so. Pedro no longer fears the silence, the source says. He understands it now. His purpose isn't seeking or claiming anymore. It's balance, acting for the earth, remembering he is earth.
Which brings us finally to the bloom itself, Act 4, restoration and return, after all that intensity.
Exactly. The struggle, the reckoning, the transformation, and then the reward. The bloom arrives at midnight.
Right on schedule.
Precisely aligned with that lost constellation, now visible in the sky. Described beautifully as a bow strung with silence.
Lovely. And the forest feels different.
Hushed. Reverent. They step into the clearing. The orchid ultima is there, in the fig tree, waiting, asleep.
And then
It stirs. It begins to open, but not all at once. In phases like the moon unfolding, light radiates from within it like a floral pulse.
it sounds like more than just a flower blooming.
It's depicted as this almost cosmic event, and then the scent arrives.
Oh, the scent. How is it described?
As a memory buried beneath language. Wild vanilla, citrus, rain, sweetness, but also sorrow, a complex, ancient smell.
How do Pedro and Maggie react?
It's overwhelming. They stagger, gasp, tears well up, but it's not sadness. It's something greater than joy, a feeling of being seen by the universe.
Being seen by the universe through a flower scent. That's profound.
It is. It's total presence, total connection in that moment. And then the final piece clicks into place. The single orchid bee, Euglossa ultima. It appears, moves like a dancer, descends right into the orchid's throat,
Completing the cycle.
completing the cycle. This century-long dance between flower and bee, finally witnessed by these two humans who've been fundamentally changed by their journey to get there.
And beneath the bloom, Pedro and Maggie, they have a moment together.
A really significant one. They hold each other. The embrace is described as not desperate, it was whole. They kneel down, they kiss.
But the feeling isn't passion.
No, the source says it's peace, and Maggie whispers, I think we're home.
Oh.
And Pedro replies, we were always meant to arrive here together. It's not just about finding the orchid anymore. It's about finding their place, their belonging within this whole system.
That's beautiful. And what happens to the orchid? Do they take anything?
No, that's crucial. The orchid pulses and then begins to close. Its purpose for this cycle is done. And they take nothing. No seed, no cutting.
Just the memory.
Just the memory and the witnessing. They didn't conquer or collect. They were simply present for the miracle.
How is their departure described?
Calm. They live hand in hand. They don't look back at the tree.
Why not?
The source says it would bloom again in another 100 years. Or not. It didn't matter. What mattered was what happened to them. They listened. They didn't ask for more than what was offered.
That acceptance feels like part of the transformation.
Definitely. And as they leave the clearing, one final little sign. A single star falls. Soft as forgiveness, quiet as breath. They watch it vanish. A gentle closing note.
So the ascent, the journey out, must feel very different.
Completely. The jungle feels lighter now, like it's exhaled, just witnessed. They notice small signs of recognition from nature. A hummingbird hovering near Maggie. A leaf trembling as Pedro passes. Subtle acknowledgments.
And Maggie reflects on this.
Yeah, she realizes their purpose wasn't just to study nature, but to remember it, remember their connection to it. She thinks the bees were trying to tell her this all along.
And Pedro agrees.
He does. It's about balance now, he says. Not chasing legacy or scientific firsts.
Does Pedro have one last encounter with Fantasma, or a sign?
A final, quiet sign. Before leaving the high forest, he sees an ordinary seed pod on the ground. And just below it,
The claw mark.
the claw mark again. With a single seed pressed into the soil inside it. A mark not left in anger, it had been left in trust.
A reciprocal gift. The forest trusts him now.
Exactly. And a vine brushes his leg as he leaves, like a parting hand. Little moments of connection.
So they return to the Cabañas Bosque. How are they received?
The change in them is obvious. Don Hernan, the owner, notes they're late, sure, but also different.
And Doni Isabella.
She says the forest whispered their names while they were gone, but the people in the village didn't know if they'd come back the same. Their quiet, grounded presence confirms they haven't. They've shifted from longing to belonging.
And the story ends with them thinking about the future. How to protect the orchid.
Yeah, they start talking about it, not with walls or labs or museum exhibitions, but with something living, something rooted in. And the source just leaves it there.
Leaves it open, pointing towards a different way. More holistic, more integrated.
Exactly. What an incredible narrative arc. A search for a flower becomes this profound lesson about our place in the world.
It really draws that sharp contrast, doesn't it? Between Raphael's mindset conquest, possession, ultimately self-destruction, and the path Pedro and Maggie find.
Which is about presence, listening deeply and recognizing finally that deep interconnectedness.
Yeah, the novella really pushes this idea that the jungle, that nature, isn't just a resource bank or a laboratory subject.
No, it presents it as this living entity. It watches, it remembers, it communicates in its own ways. And true knowledge, according to this story.
It's not about control. It's about being transformed by the understanding. It's about respect.
And achieving that balance requires understanding that fundamental truth.
Yeah.
We are nature. We aren't separate. It's harming ourselves. It's a powerful message wrapped up in this really compelling story.
Absolutely. So for you listening, maybe the takeaway from this source is to consider that idea. What does it really mean to listen to the natural world around you?
Not just in the big, obvious ways, but maybe in the quiet moments. The stillness, a particular scent, those subtle shifts we usually miss. Where might nature be speaking in its own language?
And what about that idea of remembering who you truly are, that deep intrinsic connection to the earth? How does that resonate? Something to think about, definitely, drawing from this deep dive into Pandora Is Real.
Thank you for joining us on this exploration. We hope walking through this source offered some rich insights and maybe some new perspectives.
We'll see you for the next deep dive.